Interesting comments from AOC that we wanted to touch on.
Yeah, so let's jump into that. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is doing this new CNN show. I think it's called Being AOC, which is
kind of cringy.
It's the most cringe thing I've ever heard in my life.
That's not her fault. That's
all,
CNN's fault, but it's cringy nonetheless.
Yeah, but like, you have to know that CNN's ratings are abysmal and nobody likes them. And like, you have Chris Cuomo with the thing going on with Andrew Cuomo, and you got Brian Stelter like awkwardly pretending to go after them while covering for them. They got all these terrible things going on. And, you know, this weird marriage made in unpopular heaven right now between AOC and CNN. It's just strange. Being AOC, it sounds so narcissistic and self-absorbed. So anyway, for whatever reason she agreed to do it. I don't know if she knew the name beforehand or not. But Being AOC, Dana, I think is how you say her name, not Dana?
Bash, yeah.
Dana Bash interviewed her, and she's going to say something interesting here in regards to whether or not she's going to primary Chuch Schumer.
Are you going to challenge Senator Schumer in a primary race?
You know, here's the thing, is that, and I know it drives everybody nuts, but the way that I really feel about this and the way that I really approach my politics and my political career is that I do not look at things and I do not set my course positionally. And I know there's a lot of people who do not believe that, but I can't operate the way that I operate and do the things that I do in politics while trying to be aspiring to other things or calculating to other things. And so all of that is to say is that I make decisions based on what I think our people need and my community needs. And so I'm not commenting on that.
So the thing that annoys me about this is, if you're going to be honest and upfront and answer it in a straightforward way, you have to start with either yes, no, or I don't know. So you should start with either yes, no, or I don't know, and then you could give your answer. But she jumps right into that answer, which, I'm sorry, strikes me as like the most political answer of all time, even though she's trying to pretend like I'm nothing but a straight shooter and I don't do politics. And that really frustrates me. Yeah. I hate not getting a direct answer from politicians. That wasn't even close to a direct answer. And it's also just really smug because I think she really thinks that she's like nailing it and giving a direct answer. She said, I do not look at things and set my course positionally. I can't operate the way I operate in politics while trying to be aspiring to other things or calculating to other things. I make decisions based on what I think our people need. And the other thing that frustrates me about that is, listen, I hate to beat a dead horse and bring this up because even I'm sick of the dialogue at this point on this particular issue, but people were asking her, hey, can you do force the vote to try to force a vote on Medicare for all? Her response was, no, because I want to keep my powder dry for forcing a vote on something we have a chance of winning, like the $15 minimum wage. And then the $15 minimum wage fight came up and she didn't fight. So don't tell me that I make decisions based on what I think our people need. That's not true. And then also there was the scandal recently where she was caught giving a lot of money that she fundraised to these terrible corporate Democrats.
That's right.
Remember that?
Yeah, they didn't even want the money. It was the saddest thing.
Exactly. They didn't even want the money because it was associated with her. So tell me again how you make decisions based on what you think our people need. If you're donating to these establishment corporate Democrats who are hacks, then no, what you're saying is I support them over any potential left-wing challenger who may come up against them. Now, she still did the right thing on Nina Turner. She's done the right thing. She backed Bernie. So I don't want to make it seem like it's all terrible because that wouldn't be fair and that wouldn't be true. But no, I think you're immensely political, AOC. I think you're immensely political.
And when she backed Bernie, I mean, it was literally when he was in his hospital bed. And, you know, it was at his lowest moment. And so a lot of credit for doing that. Sure. And we've seen the way that other politicians act. So I do think that's important to add to the conversation. But, you know, it's funny in her response, which I agree with you. It's sort of, it's an interesting case study in the way that younger politicians speak in a typical politician kind of way.
Right.
Because there's different jargon. There's a kind of like feigned vulnerability or, you know, I'm confiding in you.
Feigned vulnerability, right.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it feels like is I'm really going to like pour my heart out here and use these sort of jargony words like positional or whatever she said there. But ultimately, the end state is the same as the typical politician dodge, which is that we don't really have any greater insight, and you took a lot of time and used a lot of words to basically say, like, we'll see, you know?
Yeah.
But I also think contained in this incident is a really important lesson about how much power she and others in the squad and other left-wing members like Ro Khanna, et cetera, could have and exercise, because even the fact that she's given these squishy, uncertain answers and left open the door to potentially primarying Chuch Schumer appears to have had an impact on Chuch Schumer. And it shows the power of this was the original Justice Democrats concept and idea of, like, if you have to worry about your left flank, that's going to change how not only can we change the members of Congress and the people who are actually there, but it can also change the behavior of some of the members who were in Congress. Ed Markey's another good example of this. Since he got reelected based on like a left-wing coalition, some of his behavior in the Senate has actually gotten better because now that's his constituency. Those are the people who put him there. And so they have power with him. So with Schumer, the most notable thing, and we can put this tear sheet I think we have up on the screen here, is he really made a big and loud fuss with Elizabeth Warren about we don't just need a student debt freeze, we actually need cancellation.
Of $50,000 to be fair.
Of $50,000. And, you know, that's a shift in position for him. That's significant that someone with as much power as him is willing to be critical, really, here of the Biden administration and call for them to do more. Now, maybe just theatrical, because ultimately, what are you doing to try to force that issue and get things done? But even the fact of him making that case shows that there's a lot of power that AOC and others could wield, and even with these sort of squishy answers, has forced his hand in certain ways.
I think one of the reasons why this annoys me so much is that when I co-founded Justice Democrats, my conception of it was a left Tea Party, effectively. And part and parcel of that is like, I want you to make enemies of the media. I want you to make enemies of Republican leadership. I want you to make enemies of Democratic leadership. And to see what CNN is doing, it's like they're sort of doing a puff piece on her. Yeah. And, you know, I want you to understand and recognize and acknowledge that CNN actually is the enemy, because they do not cover the serious stories that the American people need to hear. They are taking a tremendous amount of money from every special interest group you could think of, whether it's Big Pharma or the health insurance companies. I mean, even on some of these networks, they have like Lockheed Martin commercials running on like the Sunday shows and stuff, and they're not doing that because they're trying to sell anything. They're doing that because they want to make sure that the narrative doesn't go too anti-war on some of the shows. So corporate media is terrible. I mean, they're part of the reason the nation is struggling as much as it is. And for you to sort of get in bed with them and get softball questions, it just reminds me of how much the mission was lost. I didn't want you to go work with Nancy Pelosi and try to play the inside Machiavellian politics game, because she's always going to win that game because she's the master at that game. Yeah. The only authority and power you had was as an outsider, where you have the bully pulpit. You have so many more Twitter followers and regular people who support you. So why not use your voice and use your power to call out Nancy Pelosi, call out Democratic leadership, use the bottom-up approach of the outsiders are now storming the House, no pun intended to compare to January 6th or anything.
Yeah.
But it's not that. It's a puff piece. And now CNN is warming to her, and she's warming to CNN. And, obviously she's still trying to work with Nancy Pelosi. This isn't me saying they never fight, because they actually, to be fair to them, to AOC, but more particularly Cori Bush, she fought and she won when it came to
eviction moratorium.
The eviction moratorium, when she was sleeping on the Capitol steps. So that's the thing is they have some hope, and there's still glimmers of, oh, this is good. But then when I see this, I'm like, this is so frustrating. And she was asked if she would run for president. And her answer was something along the lines of like, well, I don't want to say no because I don't want little girls out there to not aim high. And it's just, if you come across like a smug, arrogant narcissist, it doesn't matter how many puff pieces they do on you, you're going to get routed even by Chuch Schumer in an election. And that's the saddest thing I could ever think of. Imagine Chuch Schumer beating you in an election.
Yeah, well, we saw those. These numbers were a little suspect to me. There were primary numbers that came out in New York with regards to Cuomo and his downfall. And AOC was one of the candidates that they tested against him in a primary, and he smoked her.
He had like 26.
And everybody else, and I was like, it was very grim. It was very grim numbers to look at. But again, they're very different from the other poll numbers that we showed you yesterday. So I'm just gonna sort of like wait for the polling to settle in some kind of direction on him, because these were polar opposite of what we'd seen before. But I think you're correct that like you see these glimmers, not just with Cori Bush and the eviction moratorium. So far, the left has held a pretty strong line on reconciliation and the infrastructure bill of like, we are not voting for your infrastructure bill until we have the reconciliation deal. So there's kind of a test going on right at this moment. But I think you raise a really interesting point about just the fact that CNN feels safe doing this whole series and this very like puffy, glossy interview. Just not that Bernie's perfect either, but imagine him doing something he wouldn't do it. And if they did ask him, and I could imagine them asking him because he's popular and he rates well and all that stuff, but the questions would not be these like friendly, let's just talk about you kind of a thing. And if they did, you and I both interviewed Bernie. Like, anytime you try to ask him anything personal, he just gets pissed off because he's like, this is not about me.
I know.
Why are you asking about me? Like, let's talk about people who need better wages. Let's talk about people who need unions. So it's a very different stylistic approach, needless to say. And I do think it says something that they feel so comfortable with her, that she feels so comfortable with them. And there's nothing adversarial there whatsoever.
If Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez only talked about universal health care, the pro-act and pro-union ideas, $15 minimum wage, free college, eliminating student loan debt, eliminating medical debt, go down the list of all like the really substantive, important, serious issues, ending war. If she only talked about those things, the media would hate her. Democratic leadership would hate her. And we know this because we have the case study of Bernie, like you said, for all those years.
Yeah.
Yes, he's a curmudgeonly old guy, and that also leads them to not like him. But also, it is the fact that he's so substantive and he thinks the whole system is bullshit. If AOC was exactly like that, there wouldn't be a CNN puff piece. And I mean, I do think, I don't want to be an asshole, but I do think she does lean too much into the identity stuff, and that makes them feel more comfortable with her. And that wasn't the original idea of going there. The original idea of going there was to raise hell and be a left Tea Party. And like I said, it's not all bad, it's not all wrong. They did fight on the eviction moratorium. They are fighting on the infrastructure deal. And I genuinely hope they continue doing that. And if they do that, I'll continue doing positive reinforcement. But this stuff is like, this is a good way to get everybody to turn on you. Because like I said, CNN really is not liked. And a puff piece from the not liked people doesn't make you more liked.
Well, let me say this, and this is a little more brutal than I actually intend, but this style of politics turns you basically into Kamala Harris.
Yes.
Because it becomes like, it's about you.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's about the voters as a vessel for fulfilling your story and your, personal journey, rather than about those core issues. And like I said, that's too harsh, because as you're pointing out, she's good on the issues. She was there with Cori, the eviction moratorium. She will sometimes criticize, occasionally, in fleeting instances, Democratic leadership. Hopefully they're going to hold the line on the reconciliation package. But that's the direction of those type of politics where, it's about who you are and your lived experience, rather than I'm going to relentlessly focus on delivering for working class people.
Right.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it, you get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.